inspiration to us at Gage Green, and seeing him grow some of our genetics and really just watching the flowers and the plants express themselves to full potential is just an amazing experience. Bill does it with no-till, and I'll let him describe a little bit more about what that is. But he's definitely a real influencer in the organic, natural farming field, and we're really just blessed to have him here with us. So give it up for Bill.
Thank you.
So I will start with the first question, just to get to know a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got introduced to cannabis?
Thank you for having me, first of all. So I got into cannabis, it goes back a few years. I was a craft beer brewer for 20 years. I was a home brewer, and I also worked for Coonan Brewing Company out of Warren. I don't know if anyone knows Coonan Brewery. But I was a craft beer brewer, and I got diagnosed with celiac disease, and so which is a gluten intolerant. So I had to stop all things beer, which was devastating for me. It was probably one of the worst things that could have ever happened to me. So, stripping my soul from my body, I couldn't just be miserable, right? So I decided to grow cannabis, and but I didn't want to just grow cannabis. I actually went to a grow store, and I walked inside, and the first words out of the gentleman's mouth was, "What nutrient line are you going to run?" And I kind of smirked, and I was like, "Water." And he looked at me, he was like, "Yeah, good luck with that." And so I just kind of chuckled, and I walked out, and I had nothing to buy there, you know what I mean? Yeah, excuse me. So I went home, and I started kind of doing some research, and I came across Mountain Organics on Instagram, and he led me to grasscity.com. I don't know if anyone's familiar with grasscity.com, but he was a moderator or whatever he was on that website, and he went through his whole no-till growing experience, from his soil all the way down to curing and everything. So I read that, and there was probably 20,000 posts, comments. So I went through all that, and while I was doing that, I was composting and doing a worm farm, and at the same time I was teaching myself photography. So I was urbexing, going through Detroit with some friends, teaching myself some photography until my compost was done. My compost was ready, I mixed it all together, and Team Terpene was born.
Awesome, that's really interesting. So why do you prefer organic, and did you just get into it not knowing the difference, or is there something that puts you towards like the no-till or the natural farming route?
Well, I didn't want to just be a hydroponic grower. I didn't want to just be a cocoa grower. I wanted to have Mother Nature really bring out the terpenes and express the plant the way, to be honest, I think it should be grown. So I just studied that route, and I just stuck to it. There was a lot of hiccups that I've had throughout the process. You know, I don't know if anyone follows my page here, but I had some increase in thrift. So you just learn, and I don't know. I mean, it was yeah.
So what have you, when you first started, did you go right into doing no-till soil containers, or was there a trial and error until you got there?
It's funny you say that. I'm glad you asked that question. I started a super soil. I don't know if you guys familiar with super soil. I'm sure you guys are. So I purchased an igloo, one of the biggest igloo pot coolers you can get, and I dumped a bunch of amendments in there and cooked it and did all that stuff. And then I thought, and then I started reading, and I started looking at people's pots, and they had like this cover crop like growing out of it. It reminded me of creep show, and I'm like, what's that? And I didn't want to run the super soil. You know, it just didn't make sense to me. And I also read Spikes and Layers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Spikes and Layers. But like, then I really thought about it, and it's all about Mother Nature growing the plant, you know? So I couldn't run super soil. I just couldn't do it. I wanted something more organic than that. You know what I mean? And there's nothing more organic than Mother Nature and pure water grown flower. And if you've never experienced flower grown in this fashion, I mean, you're only selling yourself short, I think.
So what are some things that you know about no-till farming that you think others might not? And what would you recommend for people that are trying to get into it?
I would probably say make sure you start with a quality compost. If you don't have a quality compost, it's just going to be a nightmare. I tried, I composted my own, and I had a little bit of hiccups with one pot, but once you get it established, then it runs like a well-oiled machine. So I would really focus on your compost, and if you're not going to purchase it, and just make sure that you balance the browns and the greens. So just start with a quality compost, I would say.
Would you like to talk a little bit about the compost process, or no? So do you buy most of your compost these days?
No, I actually started my compost, so I bought one of those Jora composters, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I just threw a bunch of organic plant material and some, and just let it run, basically. I mean, it's Mother Nature, you know, it's not really hard. I mean, you just try to balance it and keep it going, and eventually it turns into black gold.
What do you do when you harvest your plants? Do you cut them and let them break down back into the pots, or do you compost them?
So some of the plant material that I get from the harvest, such as leaves and stems, I'll just top dress with them on top of the pots. Let that break down. And but what's cool about no-till is you don't dig up the root balls. You let the root balls kind of break down inside the pot, so that acts as nutrients for the next cycle. And yeah, I mean the top dress plant material that I use, and then the cover crops. I mean, it's kind of simple, you know. It's really not that difficult. And it's organic, and it's the bomb flower. It really is. I mean, if like I said, if you haven't sampled no-till grown flower, you have to. It's a must.
Did you bring any flowers for us to sample?
Yeah, come see me after this interview, and we can maybe do something.
So I think a lot of people are most likely curious to know, how do they get started with no-till? Like, can you give us kind of a brief step-by-step process on how to build the pot, how to get it going, and then how to maintain it?
Yeah, I mean, the process is just like growing any plant in a pot. So what I did was I mixed my compost with my worm castings, and threw it into a pot and planted some cover crop. You keep it moist, make sure that the soil organisms can move around freely, so you just keep it moist the whole time. I actually use the Blue Mat, the drip irrigation system, just because, and I'm not lazy by all means. I mean, I'm a photographer, and I bust my, I work really hard at what I do. But, the less time that I have to spend in the garden, and I know a lot of people are like, no, well, you're not a grower if you don't spend your whole life in your garden. Well, that's not what I really want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I still want to, spend some time on editing and whatnot. So, so you mix that together, and you plant cover crop. You let that sit for a little bit. And I mean, you can plant right in it. You can plant right in it after you mix it, and just keep the soil moist. I know, I know a bunch of no-till growers that water every other day, to keep it saturated. But for the most part, I mean, I run multiple plants per pot. I don't know if some of you guys see my show, but my Instagram. But I run multiple plants per pot, and so if I had to water that every single day, I would probably be watering 2 or 3 times, 4 times a day. So I just fill a bucket, because the Blue Mat system kind of saved my life from getting out of my garden and getting in front of my computer and doing my edits and taking photographs and spending time answering questions on Instagram and just showing my love for the community.
It's the Blue Mat system is definitely something that I've been curious to experiment with. I'd like to ask you what your process is on that. Was there a trial period? Would it work right off the bat? I've heard, sometimes they clog or certain things disconnect or whatever. Is that a problem that you face?
Yeah, there's been many hiccups with the Blue Mat system. Although it's a beautiful system, it works really, really well. When I first soaked them and then filled them and then stuck them in the soil, dialed them in, I was like, all right, I was kind of hesitant about walking away and hoping that it would just keep my soil saturated, but they work really well. I have had times where I've taken my scissors and I've cut a hose. There's been times where I left one on. There's been times where the bucket's fallen, and water's been everywhere. Yeah, I mean, of course, we all have mishaps, but we learn, and we learn from our mistakes, and we just fix them. But yeah, the Blue Mats are easy. They come. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but they call them carrots. There's like a little ceramic tip on them, and you just soak them, fill them up with water, and stick them in the soil, and kind of turn the little dial so you see a little drip. Dial it back a little bit, and walk away. It's kind of simple, but there's been times where they've plugged up. I use the drip. There's like these drip extensions. Those, for me, they didn't really work that well because they did clog, and some of the worms kind of climb up in there and stay saturated inside them, so they kind of clog up. But you just have to just know that they work. And if you're going to grab them, I highly recommend them. They've been a game changer for me.
Thanks. So one more question about your garden. I was wondering, do you use any outside additives? Do you have a top dress that you prefer or you purchase, or is everything pretty much coming from like within that system?
So first, I wasn't really sure about the cover crop and everything, and so I was going to Mountain Rose Herbs, and I would purchase all their different kind of herbs that they supply, like fenugreek and clover and stuff like that. And it was just shredded plant material, and I would throw that in top dress with that, and I would keep that like 1 inch thick. But after following Mountain Organics and a couple other guys, the cover crop does it all. You know what I mean? The cover crop will supply you everything you need. So now it's just, the world's your oyster once you pick which cover crop that you want to use. But I mostly stick with the clovers and a little bit of fenugreek. But you can use many other ones. So the plant material is good, the leaves and stuff, but sometimes there's leaf mold. And I don't know if you really want to do indoor grows and have a bunch of leaf mold inside your rooms. So I don't really use that a lot, but I will throw a few leaves throughout the cycle.
Very cool. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your photography. Have you been into photography for a long time, or is it? I think I briefly heard you say that you went and learned photography while you were composting and getting started.
Yeah, so again, I was diagnosed with celiac disease, so I had to stop brewing beer, and I wanted to be honest, I wanted to show the beauty of the plant the way that through my eyes. So I picked up photography about 5 years ago. And I did, before I was, I planted my first seed, I just ran around. I went to Iceland one time. I went to Europe. I went to Iceland. I went to Germany, and I ran around Detroit because I'm from just north of Detroit, 15 minutes north of Detroit. So I ran around Detroit, went urbexing. I don't know if you guys know what urbexing is. It's urban exploring through all the burned down, dilapidated houses and stuff like that. So we did that, and so I just taught myself photography that way. And then when it came time to photograph my plants, I was really nervous. I was really nervous because I wasn't sure about the lighting. I wasn't sure about just all the camera settings. And I don't know if you look at the beginning of my my Instagram page, the photos are just okay. I did little heavy editing. The photos were good. A lot of people started recognizing me, but I think now I have it dialed into exactly where I want it. But yeah, so it's been about 5 years, 6 years I've been into photography, and I suggest you pick up a camera. If you're into it, because it's changed my life. I love it.
Can you tell us a little bit about your process and your philosophy behind photography? Because you definitely have kind of like your own character, and it is very distinct. Like if I see a photo, I'll be like, yeah, that's Team Terpene. So what are some of your thoughts and ideas related to that?
So when I first picked up a camera, I started taking shots of my dog. And I took like 300-400 shots, washed out shots, okay shots. The framing wasn't really there. But then I was like, oh man, I got all these 500-600 photos on my camera. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with them? So I taught myself Lightroom. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lightroom. I highly recommend you look into that product because that program, because it's definitely a game changer, and it's awesome organizing, and you can do some edits and stuff like that. But it didn't really I didn't find my style until I taught myself Photoshop. I don't know if you guys know much about Photoshop, but Photoshop's an animal. I mean, there's so much you can do with Photoshop. And so I just kept looking up. Again, I went urbexing, so there's some tweaks that I wanted to do to the photos that I didn't really know how. So I would just YouTube it. So I would just go on YouTube and find out, how do I crop? So I would go on to Photoshop and it would teach me how to crop. So after doing that, then I just brought that into my my garden, and I started evolving my photography and my shots, one shot at a time, and then Team Terpene really just kind of hit it off.
So I know everyone wants to know, what kind of camera do you use?
That is the magic question. And to be honest, I shoot the Canon 5D Mark III. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's a great camera. I mean, it's hands down one of the best cameras. But it's really about the editing style. It's really about your editing. If you know how to edit, then you can make any photo pop. But having a 5D Mark III really gives me an edge because it's just a magical camera, and the depth of field on it is awesome. And if you compose the photo correctly, it's awesome. But I mean, it's really in the edits, because I don't want everyone to run out and buy a 5D Mark III for $2,500 and then spend another $800 on a lens and be like, well, my stuff doesn't look like Team Terpene. You know what I mean? So don't think if you just go out and buy a 5D Mark III, you're gonna have Team Terpene's photos, because I'm sorry, you just won't. To be honest.
That's really interesting. So I was wondering, do you do like image stacking, or do you do what are some things that you actually do to make your photos look like the way they do?
All right, so my macro shots, it's all photo stacking. And again, I don't know if you guys see my Instagram page, but some of my trichrome shots, that's all focus stacking. So some of those photos are 70 to 120 photos shot throughout, so the depth of field can get, stay in focus, and then it's stacked. So I'll photo stack those in Photoshop, and then I bring them back into Lightroom and do my light or my color tweaks and stuff like that.
Very cool. I'm inspired, because yeah, you have some amazing photos. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what your setup looks like. I'm guessing this is at your place, and can you like walk us through what it takes for you to create a photo from the beginning? Yeah.
So my edit room is just it's just a normal room, probably an 8 by 10 maybe. And I use, for my lighting, I use the Canon 600 EX speed lights, and I've makeshifted some light boxes for them to give it that soft kind of feel. So I have actually 2 speed lights, but I only use one, and then I have a reflector on one side, and yeah, so I mean it's actually kind of simple. That I have a tripod that I sit on, especially for my stack shots. You need a tripod, so I have that. And I mean it's pretty simple. It's a camera with a remote sensor, fires my speed lights, and just softboxes. And my space that I actually do photos, we have flowers, so they're real small, so you don't need a huge. It's just a small table, and the light on one side and the reflector on the other. It's kind of simple.
Very cool. Okay, so I wanted to ask you a little bit more broader questions about like your attitude and what gets you up in every day. What's your inspiration, and why are you here?
Well, I also started Team Terpene because the breeders deserve credit, right? So I'm all about helping breeders showcase their hard work, because I don't know if you guys know how much work goes into breeding. I'm not a breeder, so I have no idea how much time, how much effort, and so I love to help people out. And to get up in the morning and to view these beautiful flowers that are produced by some of these breeders are just, I mean, you guys know, you guys are all growers, or at least most of you guys are growers. But to showcase and to support breeders is probably hands down one of my favorite things to do. I mean, I'm always trying to find a breeder, try to find, that next strain. Like for instance, I'm running 7 Steps to Heaven this for season 13, and Michael told me it was unreleased. Like stuff like that, you know what I mean? It's like unreleased, hard to get, just support, and it's all about support.
So I wanted to ask you about Team Terpene. What is your vision for Team Terpene moving forward? You've obviously done a lot already, and where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
I haven't really let the cat out of the bag, but my family has a 40,000 square foot building in Warren, Michigan. and we just got licensed. So Team Terpene is going to have a huge presence, I guess you'd say, in the industry, but I don't really know how we're going to market it. If we are going to market Team Terpene, I'm not really 100% sure. I'm sure there'll be, a little twist to our whole company that we're starting. So, I wasn't really going to bring that up, but I did, and everyone knows now. So, it's happening. It's just obviously, going through the licensing and a few hurdles that we still need to get through. So, and hopefully,
That's congratulations. That's awesome. But I guess besides, I have just a couple more questions. Besides, obviously, you being an inspiration to many others, who inspires you in the cannabis world, and who are some people that you look up to?
Well, first of all, the whole Instagram community kind of inspires me. If it wasn't for all the growers and you guys having the guts to put your photos out there, because 5, 6 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, it was like, oh my God, you didn't want to show your face, and oh, I'm a grower, but I don't really want to say it. But you guys, the Instagram community has really helped me out to be comfortable enough to put out my work, and of course I have to give it up to Mountain Organics and a bunch of guys, Gage Green, obviously. The whole organic movement is what really inspires me and just keeps me going. So for me, I'm just a little small person in a huge community, and I think it's not just one Instagram account or 2 Instagram accounts, it's everyone, and that's what's really kind of inspired me.
I love it. And I guess this is probably the most generic question on this list, but you tried a lot of different strains and seeds, and so what is your favorite strain right now?
Excuse me. That's an impossible question. Let's be honest. But I've noticed that the seeds that I run that are grown in the no-till fashion have a huge part in my heart. Like those seeds are just, they're hard to come by. It's hard to find, growers that grow organically in that fashion, because there is, organic, super soil and stuff like that. And I'm not knocking any of that. Please don't think I am. I just in my heart, knowing that a seed that is produced the way that I'm growing it, for me, I kind of can't get any more pure than that. So, yeah.
Have you grown organic or no-till versus non-organic or no-till and seen a difference in terms of the quality that the seed produces?
Not really, I don't think. That's being really, really, really picky. That I can't say that I have. Yeah. But, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's, I would kind of I think that I kind of agree in that within the first few weeks of that seed being germinated, you're basically reprogramming it, and it's kind of pretty much adapted to your method, I would say. Should we open it up to questions? So yeah, we were going to open up the last 10 minutes to questions from the audience. If there's anybody who has any questions for Phil about organic no-till, yeah.
After you cut your plants down, how long are you waiting until you plant back into that pot?
Oh, that's a great question. You can plant right directly back into that soil right when you cut it, because the roots break down within a few weeks. So you can plant directly into it. But for me and my show or my Instagram, I usually wait 3 or 4 weeks, but I always keep cover crop going. Yep, I always make sure there's something growing in it. I take out the watering system, clean it all out, reset it. And I don't know if some people might say that's tilling, but for me it's not really tilling. But yeah, so about 3 weeks.
Any more questions before we wrap this up? Yeah.
Do you do any like mulching on top of, other than cover crops? I know you said you hardly ever cut them back, but I was just curious if you add anything for, as cycles go on, if you add more decaying matter, organic matter.
Good question. I might throw a little bit of kelp and a little bit of neem on top, but besides that, no. I just let the cover crop run, let it die. Again, once in a while, cutting it back if I have to, if it's too out of control. But that's pretty much it.
I have a question that basically like with the cover crops, oftentimes like when I let the leaves drop or the leaves fall, it like kills the cover crop in a way, or like it starts like there's like pockets where the cover crop might die off and stuff. How do you just plant more?
Yep. Yeah, so that's a good question. Like I said, I used to use a lot of leaf debris, but I don't anymore during the cycle. So I'll just let the cover crop die, and if it's not getting enough light from being in the shade, it just beasts out of the sides, and that's when I cut it back a little bit. But for the most part, you just want you just try to monitor, and if there's a couple spots where there's missing cover crop, you can throw a little bit of seeds on there, So.
I gotta answer my question because I was gonna ask if you encourage the cover crop to like sort of decompose back into the soil at any time you start noticing something.
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually the shade kind of kills it off. So once the shade kind of overpowers it, then it kind of just dies off into the soil, and then it gets uses nitrogen and nutrients or whatever, and so that's basically how the cycle runs.
Very cool. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm just seeing some stuff about a bacterial or fungal balance in the soil. I'm kind of coming in on the end of what you're talking about. Have you spoken on that at all?
Yeah, I usually don't get too technical sometimes, but you definitely want a bacterial dominant soil. But I don't really count, do a bacterial count. I mean, it's Mother Nature in a pot, so I guess I've kind of gotten lucky, but I mean, the whole cycle has been working for me. So, I mean, I don't really do, fungal dominant teas or bacterial dominant teas. I just run cover crop. I mean, it's kind of simple for me. I don't make it too technical. When it gets too technical, it's not fun for me. I still like the art of it, so yeah.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I was going to ask you, how do you treat your water? Is it just water in a reservoir? What kind of water? And do you bubble it, aerate it, or move it, or anything like that?
That's a great question. And I run RO water through an RO system, and I just fill up the bucket, and the blue mats drip the water just as normal. And no, I don't really treat it. I probably could treat it, but no bubbling. No, because for me, it's one 5-gallon bucket that will, uses the water, empty out, every day pretty much. So by the time I pour it in there and splash it around, and when it drips, I feel like it gets a little bit of aeration. So there's no need for aerating my water.
Yeah, I like that. You're able to grow obviously minerally dense plants with RO water, which has no minerals in it. So you're basically getting everything from your soil.
I do add a little bit of not gypsum, but I did add a little minerals to them to my soil, so that also helps kind of with the mineral depletion, if you will.
Any more questions?
So you're not concerned with pH at all, right?
No. He asked if I'm concerned about pH. No. So I don't pH my water at all. I don't make it that difficult. I just run it, and it works.
Yeah, I love the keep it simple method. Any other questions? If not, I would say that pretty much wraps up our talk. Really thank you, Phil, for being here with us. And is there any last words you want to say?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Gage Green Group and you, Michael, for having me. This was one of my first interviews, and I'm kind of nervous, so I appreciate you guys bearing with me. But yeah, so Gage Green Group, I just want to thank you for having me and the team. This is the team. I do have a team, but this is really the team. I'm the photographer. I'm the grower. I do it all. So, an Instagrammer. But yeah, so I just want to thank you for having me.